So these are vignettes of Canada from 1670 to 1900. I wanted to give a little bit of history about Canada to begin with. So it should be noted that Canada was inhabited by people who had 70 different dialects in 12 major language groupings over 7 different geographical areas, and trade was happening before the arrival of Europeans. I live on an island that is unceded land of the Coast Salish people who traded commodities up and down the North American coastline. But here's the colonial story of Canada through banknotes. So to give you some timelines here, 1670 banknotes were traded in Canada with Europeans. In 1817, there was the first banknote that we'll look at. And there were over 170 different private banks to produce banknotes. Pre-1841, Upper Canada, which was English-speaking, and Lower Canada, which was French-speaking, produced banknotes. In 1841 to 1867, the province of Canada was formed. And in 1867 to 1934, it was Dominion of Canada, 1935, Bank of Canada, and the last private banknote was produced in 1943, which was the Royal Bank. So during the French colonial period, banks were used to pay soldiers due to the lack of coin. And they sort of went in and out of favor. As you can imagine, counterfeiting was rife. So during that French colonial period in the 1670s and 80s and 90s, playing cards were used. Now, Canada has a very complicated and complex relationship with the US. We went to war with the US in 1812. And it was largely over a blockade that the British had put in place over American ports because they were battling the French in Europe at that time period too. But after the War of 1812, in Canada, British banknotes were being used, and they were American script. So this is from 1815, and it's in pounds or shillings. So Canada had to decide what kind of currency it was going to use. So a lot of the currencies that you're going to see are in multiple different currencies. So of the day, there were lots of talk about piastres, which is actually an Italian word meaning metal or a flat metal. And where that comes from is the Spanish, who were active in the area. Also, considerations were to the sou for French, as well as obviously pounds and dollar. So this is Upper Canada, payable in Montreal in 1820. Again, this is English speaking. A lot of the banknotes were single point of redemption. So unlike currencies here now, where it's traded all over the place, even globally, these were specific areas where they were to be redeemed. Bank of Nova Scotia, 1832, they start, and it's presently called the BNS or Scotia Bank. And again, you can see it in pounds. In 1837, we have Upper Canada. It's payable in Toronto, $2 or 10 shillings. So again, multiple different currencies all traded in what was to become Canada. Here is a private bank, an early Molson Bank. You've got 3 different types of currencies. You've got 30 sou, $25, and 15 piastres. So these are, again, just an amazing note. Of course, Molsons were a big family agriculturally, and then they were a big brewery family, and they produced beer. Here's a Mechanics Bank, 1837, redeemable in St. John's, and St. John's is the capital of New Brunswick, an early province. And what's interesting about this banknote is it's bilingual, because you've got the trois and the three, both on one banknote. The province of Canada was formed in 1866, and it largely became a province because of the tension that had been produced in the 1840s. We had a revolution in Canada in the 1840s because of the Family Compact. And what happened there was a group of British men were controlling both the economies of local areas, but also all the banknotes. It was so bad that, of course, what did the British do at the time with ne'er-do-wells? They sent them to Australia or Tasmania. So quickly, people in Upper and Lower Canada decided, look, we have to do something. We're either going to be reinvaded by the US or we need to start to form a union. So that's how the province of Canada was formed, basically around the 1866. Again, site specific. The two gentlemen there are Cabot and Champlain, I think. And again, this is payable in Montreal. This one is payable in Toronto. Here we have a salute to the sort of British cresting in the front there, as well as a First Nations woman in the left-hand corner. It is a very complicated situation because in the War of 1812, there were a lot of First Nations people fighting the Americans because they wanted restrictions about colonization east of the Champlains, west of the Champlains. So we have a complex relationship with First Nations at this time. Here is the importance of the beaver. For some of you that may not know, beaver pelts in Canada was a major export at this time period for essentially beaver hats, which was all the rage. Here we're starting to look at the emergence of the monarchy. So you have the king and queen there in a specimen note, payable again in Toronto. This is an interesting private bank that was part of the Family Compact. And the reason why I've included this is the commercial bank, 10 pounds, 10 shillings, or $10, because it fails when Canada becomes a country in 1867. Queen's University, which is one of the more prestigious universities in Canada, had 2/3 of its endowments with this bank that went bankrupt. The Bank of Commerce, which was formed in 1867, later becomes CIBC, which is one of the big six now, produced banknotes as well at the turn of the province of Canada. Again, you have cresting of the bank. We had this starting of the Bank of Toronto, which is started in 1855. Presently, it's called TD Bank, and this banknote is in 1859. It's redeemable in a city called Peterborough, which is just outside of Toronto, no, a suburb really of Toronto. But Peterborough at that time period was a major hub. On the bottom there, you've also got capital of $2 million. Here's a short-lived bank, 1857 to 1859. This banknote was 1858. You've got an emergence of domestic sort of viewing of farmland, herds of cows, that sort of thing. A lot of banknotes were produced by local communities to have access of capital to do farming, also to do fishing, mining, and people would get together and lobby their MP to have a bank. So in 1870, we have the emergence of the Dominion of Canada banknotes. Here's Jacques Cartier, and this banknote is payable in Ottawa in 1870. Payable in Toronto. I just want to go back here because it does say Ottawa here in the front, but it's actually payable in Toronto. The Dominion of Canada celebrates the Generals Wolfe and Montcalm, who were two combatants during the Plains of Abraham, which was a major war that happened in Canada between the English and French during 1758. Also in the center of this banknote, it's quite curious because it's got a First Nations person there and also a train. So you've got some ideas of trains as well as the role of First Nations people in this banknote. Payable, Montreal. Here's an interesting one that was actually produced in Boston. It's $2 in 1873, but it is payable in St. John, New Brunswick. It's sort of a salute to what was happening here again, was an export of lumber. So a lot of, again, the pressure was on for us to have a better sense of country as Americans were moving in and their banknotes were being used in Canada. This banknote is from Quebec. Again, we have 4 piastres. If you look at here, it's quite interesting because there's no mention of Canada, the province of Quebec. This bank was a leader in the Montreal area at this time period from 1874 to 1923. Again, you have horses here and then the president of the bank in the right-hand corner. Here, again, we're moving into the 1878 here, and we're starting to see more of the British royalty. The Countess of Dufferin here with the Dominion of Canada. Payable, Halifax. Again, a lot of these banknotes were site-specific. Eastern Canada with Halifax, St. John's, and then Toronto and Montreal being the big players at this time period during the 1870s. Sometimes what's ignored in the banknote world is, okay, that was happening in Eastern Canada, but what was happening in Western Canada with happenings in British Columbia? And British Columbia actually joined Canada relatively early in 1871. So we also had the Bank of British Columbia, and that's the province I currently live in. Again, we have $5 and the Roman numerals here, but it is payable in Victoria. Here, the big numbers are the serial numbers of the banknote. So you've got 130041, and that is the serial number on the front. So at this time period, again, banknotes were having the serial numbers on the reverse. We have the Dominion of Canada here, Duke of Argyll, who's the Governor General, and Marquis de Lome was his common name. Again, sort of these odd denominations with the $4. Dominion of Canada, there's no site-specific designation any longer. Here's a beautiful banknote, again, tribute to the logging of the time period, with the Earl of Aberdeen and the Countess as well being portrayed. On the reverse, we're starting to see the emergence of the Dominion of Canada with Parliament being on the reverse. And this scene is utilized again in 1967 on the 100th anniversary of Canada. This is one of my favorites because it's a King George note, but it features a dory, which is a small boat, and they're cod fishing. Again, a tribute to the fishery. And this is 1897. It's quite an interesting, lovely banknote, I think. On the reverse, because I grew up in the prairies of Alberta, this stooking of grain is an iconic figure of the time period. Growing up on the prairies, later on, grain is what we call swathed and laid to dry, but in this time period, it was bundled and stooped. At this time period too, there's the gold rush going on in the Yukon, and the Bank of Commerce, which was again a private banknote company, was one of the first Eastern banks to go out into the West. And here you have an overprint with Yukon District in red, with the red numeration there, and you have much more elaborate. In terms of cresting here, you've got a train, a ship in the crest, as well as the allegoric figures. Quite a lovely note, again, based in Toronto, but for the Yukon District, which again joined Confederation relatively early in 1898. And that's the area where the gold rush was happening. This bank, the Bank of Commerce, got wound up in the 1890s and right into the 20th century, into the mid 1900s. It was all about the building of bank buildings and a way of having public confidence in a bank was to have large buildings. So here you have a 7-story building in Toronto in 1892. Bank of Commerce also went on to have the largest building in the Commonwealth as well later on in their history. Here is the Bank of Prince Edward Island from 1856 to 1881. Prince Edward Island is our smallest province in terms of area, but again, a pastoral setting with a child and a horse and a dog in the center of the note, a tribute to the guns and anchorage of being on the East Coast. And you've also got the iconic horses and little pigs on the side there. Interesting enough, it says Canadian currency. Because at that time period, we're still debating, do we follow the US dollar? Or, what is the difference between a Canadian dollar and a US dollar? So you have that overprint of Canadian currency. Bank of Prince Edward Island on the back. Here is the Union Bank of Newfoundland. Now, technically, Newfoundland is not a part of Canada at this point. Newfoundland does not join Confederation until 1949. Here we have an interesting banknote, though, because it's in pounds. It is redeemable in St. John's, and you have a tribute to the cod fishery. Now, this is very important because Newfoundland has a couple of banks here that are quite active. So this was established in 1854, and it's a tribute to cod. The area of Newfoundland is roughly called the Grand Banks for its fishing, and the importance of the cod fishery was important for Britain as well, because that's where it was getting fed from with the cod. But it was a bank that was solely related to the fishery. This note is the Union Bank. I think one of the loveliest train notes that I've ever seen. This is the front of it, again, payable in St. John's in 1889. Now, this is not to be confused with St. John, which was the capital of New Brunswick. So St. John's with an S is in Newfoundland. Lovely train note. Reverse is also a train as well. So we see the importance and thinking of transportation and trains in this time period. This is also the commercial bank, also from Newfoundland, a tribute to sailing here. So you've got a young boy climbing up the sail. You've got a woman, the classic woman, looking out into the sea in the middle, and you've got people actively fishing in the right-hand corner. Okay, so what happens in 1894, you might ask, because both the Union Bank and the commercial bank all on the same day. And it's largely because the London financiers decided the cod fishery wasn't a good investment, and they called all their loans. So we lost two major banks all on the same day in Newfoundland. And that is perhaps one of the reasons why Newfoundland, until very recently, was a have-not province. Another classic Union Bank from Prince Edward Island this time. You've got the classic left-hand corner with the English version of Slaying the Dragon, and a pastoral center with a woman and cows, and then you have your tribute to the shipping. Prince Edward Island actually had 5 banks. None of them survived. Again, all declared bankrupt. So again, a tremendous disappointment for those people. You've also got a dual denomination here, again, $5 for 20 shillings and 10 pence. So it's almost like a little converter at the same time as a banknote in terms of currency. Also went through a period of fractional currency. Starting in 1870, we had the Dominion of Canada. These are called shin plasters. And it's largely because people used to put them on the shins of their legs to keep warm. 25 cents. So this is the first one in 1870. It is on the presentation at Montreal, Toronto, or St. John with no S, so that means New Brunswick. So again, it is site-specific banknote. In 1900, they changed the configuration of the fractional currency. So you have the 25 cents, you have the iconic British allegoric figure there, again, with the British shield. On the reverse, you have no site-specific redeemable place, and that's a big change. This last slide of this talk is actually going to be talking about the Merchant Bank of Halifax. The Canadian banks had a great relationship with the Caribbean and other places in South America as well, such as Guyana. And one of the areas that people find interesting in collecting banknotes is to look at banknotes that had the Caribbean influence. So this banknote again has $5, but also £1, 1 shilling, but it is redeemable in Hamilton, Bermuda. And of course, the trade going on in Bermuda was for spice, but also rum. So again, an interesting setup. So the reverse again, very clear: £1, 1 shilling sterling, or $5, but redeemable at Bermuda. So that's the end of this presentation. All of these banknotes can be found on the Bank of Canada Museum website, .ca, and some lovely banknotes. I've only scratched the quick surface of both federally produced banknotes and gave you some idea of the 170 plus banknotes that are a part of Canada's history. So I'm going to turn it back over for Q&A now, perhaps.
Thanks, Roger. Yes, Q&A is open. I asked Roger to keep it short. I mean, his presentation spanned the entire history of Canada, but I thought it would have been better to do it in 2 parts, so to keep attention. Well, any questions for Roger?
Yes, Roger. The first piece you show, the military piece, it refers to I say Yonge Street, Yonge. Now, I've been there, and that's in Toronto, I think.
Yes.
Now, but Yonge Street is quite famous for something, isn't it? Or is that my imagination? Or is it called Yonge Street now? Is there something in my mind about it?
No, it's it could be pronounced Young, but most people in Canada would say Yonge Street. I don't know the history of the name. I'm sorry.
No, but it's a very long street, isn't it?
Yes, it's the longest in Canada in a single street.
Yeah, that's what it is then. Okay, thank you.
Roger, the Bank of Commerce of 1867, just a few slides ahead of this we are seeing now. You have a $10. Ahead, a little bit ahead. No, next. I'll tell you when it comes. It's the $10 Bank of Commerce with the 2 lions at the center.
It's not this one. Okay.
That is the same bank which had the famous $100 counterfeited.
Yes.
But do you know a bit more about the story
of the counterfeit?
Yes, who was really counterfeiting these notes? The Germans or?
It could have been the Germans. I'm not sure of the story behind the counterfeit, but I know that it is available on eBay as a counterfeit. I'm not sure the banknote you're referring to in this presentation.
Bank of Commerce, 1837, $10, and there's a couple of lions at the center. This one.
This one?
A lion and a unicorn, I think.
Yes. You just passed it.
Yeah, it has a lion and a unicorn on the coat of arms. By the coat of arms in the center top.
Maybe it was 1867, actually.
This one?
No, 2 lions and a unicorn. This one.
Oh, big lion, little lion, and a unicorn.
Right. So this is the same bank which had the $100 counterfeited.
Correct. Yes, throughout Canadian history, there have been counterfeits for sure. And one group, as you said, was up on eBay, and it's stamped counterfeit as well, and hole punched, I believe, as well. But I don't know what the history behind the counterfeiting was. In a presentation that I'll give perhaps in the second part, I do talk about the fall of the Bank of Vancouver, which was a banknote that was produced by a city that was led into bankruptcy because of withdrawal of German capital at the start of World War I. It was roughly about 1913 that the Bank of Vancouver went under. So the whole idea of foreign interventions within currency is a part of Canada's history as well. Part of the reason why the shin plasters, the fractional currency, was introduced in the 1870s was because of the use of American coin in Canada, because there were so many bank failures at that time period. A lot of people were using U.S. silver dollars and U.S. gold coins in Canada as currency, particularly in the West, where there wasn't a lot of banks, period. So for my grandparents who came in through Victoria, because of their Chinese ancestry, they arrived in Victoria and Vancouver. Their bias was towards the American silver dollar and American gold. And later on, in the 1900s, Canada produced its own gold coins for circulation. There was a time in Canadian history where you could go to the bank and redeem your currency for gold. Much like the British pounds, is actually based on a pound of silver. So the fractions of shillings and pence were all fractions of silver. So it's all related back to that hard asset at the time.
Thank you.
Cedric has his hand up.
Cedric, go ahead, ask.
Yeah, thank you very much, Roger. Great presentation. I think it was very interesting and lovely vignettes on those banknotes. I was particularly interested on those banknotes that are redeemable in different countries, in different cities. Particularly because some of the banknotes are do not only have a rubber stamp saying which city, but those of the Dominion Bank that actually are fully printed with the back saying which city are they redeemable at. So it is possible to find Dominion banknotes with different backs saying one is redeemable in one city and others are redeemable in other cities. So it is possible to have those collections. And how many cities does the Dominion Bank has
Yeah,
with different banks.
so it was predominantly four cities. The most common is Montreal and Toronto, but also Halifax and St. John. And the Halifax St. John collection is the hardest to find and the rarest. I've only seen Montreal and Toronto. I have not, well, and I saw the Halifax one too, but I couldn't find a St. John one to present. So extremely rare. As is the Newfoundland train note. One came up for auction, I think at Spank, and the opening bid was 10,000 US.
Roger, I know in U.S. currency that, or counterfeiting U.S. currency, one of the things that was a problem in the U.S. was people who would counterfeit in Canada, cross the border into the U.S. and pass the currency in the U.S. and then run back to Canada. Was that likewise a problem with Canadian banks, that the counterfeiters were in the U.S. and they would cross a jurisdiction that prevented them from being pursued?
Oh yes. So the international note that I put out there, that was definitely the case. Produced by an American and simply to garner government cash and then not redeem them in his own bank. So again, the whole idea of a license to print money was paramount. So a lot of the private banks, not only were they a way of generating capital for local communities to develop, but there were some unscrupulous folks that just got people to give them their current currency from other banks or other government institution and then not redeem their own banknotes. So banks themselves were reluctant to receive another bank's banknotes because they didn't know the strength of the bank. And again, a collusion of banks accepting one or another notes, especially early on, was a big problem. So that universality of a banknote being used across a country or across a region was quite limited. So a lot of the major cities in Canada produce their own banknotes. So Hamilton is another hotbed. Kingston, which was at one point thought to be a capital for Canada before the War of 1812. But they decided on Ottawa because it was a little bit further away from the US border. So yeah, the back and forth between the US and Canada harboring each other's ne'er-do-wells. So in the Revolution of 1840, a lot of the people escaped going to Tasmania by seeking refuge in the US. That answers your question, John, or not? A long-winded way.
Oh yeah, I've never, in the stuff I've read, I've just never heard the Canadian point of view on that issue. But I figured culturally we're so alike, why wouldn't it go both?
Yeah. So I mean, the Americans, especially in 1840, they thought that again, Canada could be invaded. Again, a lot of the provinces, including British Columbia and Yukon, joining the Confederation of Canada, largely was driven by the fear of Americanism coming up from the States. Interesting with the Bank of British Columbia, they had branches as far south as San Francisco at the time period and had a very good trade from San Francisco right up the west coast of British Columbia at that time. So a lot was going on commercially here on the west coast, with lumber, fishing being the predominant industries from San Francisco to the Yukon, of course, and gold. So it's supplying all those people going for gold in the Yukon. There's an old adage in Canada that says, you know, we're the mouse beside the elephant being the US, and that we can squeak, 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 but if the elephant ever turns on us, we're promptly flattened. Yeah, in that War of 1812, so the early British banknote, it was, I think, that one of the only times that the U.S. Was invaded. And the story in Canada is, well, that's why the White House is white, is that the British Canadian Army burned it and scorched the White House. And that's why they had to paint it white, because it was burned down by the Canadian British forces. I think that's the other big reason why Canadians, especially on the sports field, really pride themselves if they can ever defeat an American team. So Canadian women's soccer, Canadian women's hockey, and now football or soccer in Canada has become huge, because all of a sudden we're at the same level and can defeat the Americans. So that's a big thing in Canada. Is, you know, it's somewhat like the little brother saying to the big brother, yes, we can compete with you. And the same with currency. So the big debate at one point in Canada was the trading of Canadian dollar to US dollar at par. And for many years, that was the case. But in more recent times, the Canadian dollar is only traded at par with US for maybe a year and a half. And again, it's largely due to trade. Is when we build a car in Canada, there's a 30% currency difference in terms of it's extremely profitable for companies to build in Canada and then ship to the US. So it's all about trade again.
Yeah, sometimes jokes are funny on one side that aren't so funny on the other side. I know when I worked in Dayton, Ohio, and bought parts that were shipped into St. Catharines, our plant in St. Catharines, Ontario, I was in the St. Catharines, Ontario plant the day that the toonie came out, the $2 Canadian coin. And at the time, there was discussion about, well, what should it be called? Of course, you know, the $1 coin is called the loonie. What should the $2 coin be called? And they asked me my opinion, and I said, how about the Susan B. Anthony dollar? And I thought that was funny. Apparently, many Canadians did not think that was funny, but that would, of course, been a 1-for-2 exchange.
So Cedrin, here's the bank for the Bank of Toronto. And again, redeemable in Peterborough, which Peterborough is just now somewhat of a suburb of Toronto. Peterborough was a really an agricultural hub, and that's why the Bank of Toronto wanted to be there. If you notice, though, it does say Province of Canada on it, unlike the Quebec notes that just said Province of Quebec. So it gives you the idea of Quebec has always considered itself a bit separate from the rest of Canada.
This is spelled, the overstamp is spelled B-O-R-O?
Yes, in this case, but in when you're looking it up, it is more Borough after the OUGH of English background rather than Peter Borough.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking. It was the same city. They just made the rubber stamp a little shorter.
Yeah. I think it's also interesting. They always put in the capital at somewhere on the banknote, and here it's $2 million. So I mean, in 1859, I mean, $2 million was huge amount of money. But again, to get your own banknote, you had to lobby your MP, and there was no such thing as conflict of interest. So if you get your MP on side and promise him, blah, 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 you got a charter to print your own money. Hopefully gone are those days, but maybe not the way some companies seem to get preferential treatment days. So this is the International Bank that I said was very quick, 1857 to only 1859. And this note is 1858. And these are readily available now because it was so short-lived. And again, you've got that split between $5 and £1, 5 shillings at that time period.
All right, couple of people left. Any more question for Roger? Specific question is presentation. All right, seems not. Then I'll call it quit. I mean, you're going to work, Roger, or today you're off?
No, it's my birthday today. I'm going out to
doesn't mean anything. You still can work on your birthday.
No work. Just play. Just play.
Happy birthday. And thanks
Happy
for your
birthday.
present to us.
Oh, you're most welcome. Pleasure to be with all of you on my birthday. This is my 65th year on the planet. And I hope to spend more time with banknotes, less time at work. And look forward to the gardening season. So I wish everyone a happy gardening season as we move into spring. I guess if you're in the southern hemisphere, you're moving into winter, but for us, it's moving into spring.
We're having a beautiful spring too over here. A lot of flowers. I mean, cherry blossom. All right, guys. So thanks everyone for joining. Thanks to Roger for sharing his knowledge. And until next time, goodbye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you. Goodbye.
Bye. Bye-bye, guys.